There's a strange contradiction hidden inside modern American life. A country that prides itself on freedom has entire neighborhoods where something as simple as drying your clothes in the open air can be restricted, discouraged, or even penalized. Not because it's harmful, not because it doesn't work, but because it doesn't fit the system. At first glance, it sounds insignificant. But when you start pulling on that thread, it reveals something much larger. Because drying clothes is not just a chore, it's a behavior. And behaviors don't disappear randomly. They are replaced. Across most of the world, this behavior never needed replacing. In Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, air drying is still the default. It requires no electricity, no machine, no recurring cost. It's one of the simplest examples of humans working with their environment instead of against it. So when a country with advanced technology abandons something that efficient, the reason isn't progress alone. It's alignment. Alignment between business incentives, cultural identity, and environmental design. To understand how that alignment formed, you have to go back to a moment when the American lifestyle itself was being engineered. After World War II, the United States entered a phase of rapid expansion. But this wasn't just economic growth, it was structural transformation. Entire suburban ecosystems were built with precision. These weren't just houses placed next to each other, they were controlled environments designed to reflect a very specific version of success. Order, cleanliness, uniformity, and privacy became visual standards. And once you define a visual standard, you also define what doesn't belong. Inside these homes, a new generation of appliances began to appear. Among them was the electric dryer. Now, dryers had existed before, but they weren't essential. Clotheslines were already solving the problem efficiently. But efficiency wasn't the selling point. The selling point was identity. Companies like Whirlpool Corporation and General Electric weren't just competing on functionality, they were shaping perception. They positioned their products as symbols of modern living. Convenience became associated with indoor systems. Effortlessness became a status marker. And this is where psychology begins to take over. When a behavior becomes associated with status, it stops being just a choice. It becomes a signal. Hanging clothes outside was no longer just about drying fabric, it started to represent something outdated. Something less refined. Something that didn't belong in the new version of the American dream. Once that association forms, people don't need to be forced to change. They change voluntarily, because they want to align with the identity being promoted. But voluntary change isn't always enough to eliminate alternatives. Because as long as clotheslines remained visible, the old system still existed. And visibility matters. People question things when they see alternatives working in real life. So the next layer of control didn't come from corporations, it came from regulation. Homeowners associations, or HOAs, became one of the most powerful yet overlooked forces in shaping everyday behavior. Originally introduced to maintain property values, they gradually evolved into systems that controlled aesthetics. And aesthetics are not neutral, they are curated. HOAs didn't evaluate whether clotheslines were efficient. They evaluated whether they fit the visual identity of the neighborhood. And they didn't. So rules were created. Not everywhere, but enough to create a pattern. Clotheslines were labeled as messy, distracting, or even associated with lower socioeconomic status. And once that label sticks, it spreads faster than logic ever could. Because people don't just follow rules, they follow social signals. This is where something subtle but powerful happens. A behavior doesn't need to be universally banned to disappear. It just needs to be removed from enough environments that it stops feeling normal. Over time, new generations grow up without seeing it. And when something isn't seen, it isn't considered. It fades, not through force, but through absence. Meanwhile, something else grows in its place. Electric drying doesn't just replace air drying, it integrates into a broader system. It consumes energy, supports utility infrastructure, and reinforces appliance dependency. Unlike sunlight, it can be measured, billed, and scaled. And that makes it economically valuable. This is the core pattern behind many modern shifts. Free systems are replaced by monetized systems, not because they are always better, but because they are economically compatible with growth. And once a monetized system takes hold, it reinforces itself. Marketing continues to validate it. Regulations limit alternatives. Cultural norms stabilize around it. At that point, the system doesn't need to compete anymore, it becomes the default. And defaults are powerful. Because most people don't question defaults. They operate within them. This is why the majority of Americans don't actively choose dryers over clotheslines. They inherit that choice. It's built into their homes, their neighborhoods, and their expectations. It feels natural, even though it's not universal. And that distinction matters. Because what feels natural is often just what has been repeated long enough to become invisible. But there's another layer to this story, one that makes it even more interesting. In recent years, some states have started pushing back. Right to dry laws have emerged, limiting the ability of HOAs to ban outdoor clotheslines. This isn't just about laundry, it's about reclaiming a choice that quietly disappeared. And the fact that such laws are needed tells you everything about how deeply the system has shaped behavior. At the same time, rising energy costs in other parts of the world have reinforced the value of air drying. In many countries, it was never abandoned in the first place. Which creates a contrast. One system optimized for visibility, control, and monetization. The other optimized for simplicity and efficiency. Neither exists in isolation, they reflect the priorities of the environments they operate in. And that's the key insight. This isn't a story about one country doing something wrong or another doing it right. It's a story about how systems influence behavior over time. How businesses, regulations, and cultural narratives align to create a new normal. And how that normal can feel so natural that it goes completely unquestioned. Because once a behavior is embedded deeply enough, it stops feeling like a decision. It becomes part of identity. And identity is one of the hardest things to change, not because it's logical, but because it's familiar. So the next time you use a dryer, it's worth asking a simple question. Not whether it works, but why it became the standard. Because behind that everyday action is a chain of decisions made decades ago, decisions shaped by economic incentives, cultural messaging, and structural design. And once you start seeing that pattern here, you begin to notice it everywhere. In the products you use, the habits you follow, and the systems you rarely question. Because most of the time, you're not just making choices,